what interest rate hedging have you seen employed to mitigate against interest rate risk on various projects? So it's a question about hedging interest rates. Maybe I explain what hedging interest rates mean.
Well, okay, with respect to hedging interest rates and our webinar subject right now, it's hedging interest rates as it relates to as you're building your apartment. How do you avoid being in a situation where you started expecting your interest rate costs to be X during the project, but the interest during the project goes up by 200 basis points. Yes. How do you hedge against that? Well, what we've done is we've asked lenders to create that product, in fact, and there's a couple of lenders that have that, where now the builder, although his loan is approved and it tends to be floating during construction, yes, if you're concerned that the interest rate's going to be too high, you can actually lock in your rate right now and hedge against that interest rate rise, so that you know right from the beginning what your cost is going to be. And when you close your project, when you finish and deliver your project, you've already booked your rate for the next, 25, 30, 40 years, depending on what product you use to close. So there are two lenders that over the last 6 months have actually come up with a product to do just that.
So what's the cost of hedging? Can you estimate it?
So I'll give you an exact example. Last week, we locked in a rate on a build. It was for $27 million, where if he locked in and was complete today, he'd be around 3.8, 3.9. And we locked in the rate at 4.1, and he's going to finish the build over the next 18 months. So the cost is about 20 basis points off of today's rates.
Okay, so there was no fee for locking in. It was just that the interest rate was set and...
Yeah.
So how does the lender protect himself on that? I'm not quite understanding what's...
So the lender on the back end in the capital markets office of the lender, they're booking that rate long term.
Got it.
Right away. And what the lender actually does, instead of dispersing progressively the loan during construction, they disperse it in escrow in total. That's right. So the lender has now the whole amount dispersed, and to mitigate some of the cost of dispersing all the full loan amount, well, the full amount that's dispersed that's not being used is actually also generating interest. So you might only be getting 2%.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
4%. Yeah. So to me, it's an innovative product that the lenders have come up with, because we were asking them to do that. And what we did is the market is educating that youth that David was talking about. The lender market has so many young minds, brilliant young minds, but no experience. How do you deal with this? They don't see that train coming. So I feel that the market and the gray hair or the lack of hair amongst us, it's up to us to educate the lenders and the borrowers on what they should be doing. We've been through it before. We know how to get through it. And I'm finding that the lenders are receptive to these solutions. And the borrowers, well, they need more convincing. Say, hey, here's what you got to do. Although for the last 10 years, you've made money this way, here's how you're going to protect your money.
David, I'm going to come to you in one second.
Just
David,
a quick comment to Michel is that as a borrower, learning about your lender, learning how your lender matches his funding. In other words, how they think. Are they creative? And Michel's spoken of a product that is very, very, for a creative lender, they're just matching funds. That's all they're doing. So when you're asking a lender how they fund or how they work with their interest rates, the first question is, how do you match your funding with what you're taking from the consumer?
And Michel, I want to ask one question, because I think it's actually quite interesting. What's the risk of the hedge for the borrower, for the developer? Because there is a risk, but is it just an opportunity cost? They're accepting a slightly higher on average. Potentially, if the rate drops faster and they're locked in, they've missed an opportunity. So there's an opportunity cost to the hedge.
I think it's an absolute opportunity cost that's weighed against your ability to sleep well at night.
Yes.
In the end, if that's what makes you comfortable, and we that's how we put it for them. Like, how uncomfortable are you willing to be going forward? How important is it for you to say, I don't have to worry about this? And we detail for them, here's how much it's going to cost if it goes up by a quarter point, by 50 points, by 100 points, and let them take their decision.
But I also think they're looking forward at their liquidity situation, and they're deciding whether they have to lock in order to protect themselves on a potential upside interest increase exposure on cash flow. So if you there's two type of people. There's just the conservative person who will always grab that hedge to make sure that they can sleep at night, and then there are the other people who are looking at it going, well, my liquidity is not great. I don't have a source of equity if the bank tightens up on me here, so I better lock in, or I'm going to find myself not able to make my payments, and that's what triggers, the failure to pay your lender is an almost assured path to a sale.
Absolutely, and what we've been seeing is exactly that. Some borrowers say, hey, I understand that at the end of my project, when it's time for me to fix and I have to buy down, and each quarter point cost me $250,000, I can afford that for 75 basis points. So they monitor the situation and then decide when they fix. But it's important that they understand that, because most borrowers in the middle of their project and most builders, they're entirely focused on dealing with the sub-trades, not dealing with the interest rates. That's where, folks like us really have to provide that support and identify what's that train coming. You see the light,
Michel,
recognize it.
Michel, as a broad rule, who should hedge and who shouldn't hedge? Can you say that? Or is it your sleep at night factor? Yeah,
I think the sleep at night factor is depends on the amount of liquidity that you have.
Yes.
You got to understand, I have the ability to buy down the rate if I have to, or I don't have the ability. And that's the discussion, and sometimes a difficult discussion. How much money do you really have?
Okay, so why do we say this? The guy who's building for all cash doesn't need to hedge. The guy who's got massive leverage needs to hedge.
The guy that's building all cash, I don't think he's very smart in protecting his money in this market. And just because you have the cash and you worked so hard, maybe you should look at protecting it and use the bank's money, because if the market turns, you're not going to get your money out from the bank. The bank's not going to lend you. So
you won't be able to pull out your equity. You won't be able to pull out the cash you put in. Interesting.
Yeah.